The emergency alarm echoed through the massive halls of Haven's Rest as Ambassador Krell watched another star system die. The viewscreen showed distant explosions where the Korax colony had been just hours before. 12 billion souls snuffed out in minutes by the relentless advance of the Void Hunters. The crystalline surface beneath his feet vibrated with each impact as the station's shields deflected debris from the destroyed world. Krell's scaled hands gripped the railing tighter. His people, the Thaxians, had survived the crushing gravity and poisonous atmosphere of their homeworld for millennia. They were giants among the galaxy's races, their bones dense as metal and their skin thick enough to stop plasma bolts. Yet even they trembled before the mechanical horror that swept across the stars. Behind him, the emergency council gathered in the war room. Representatives from 12 Deathworld species sat around the hexagonal table, each one a testament to evolution's cruelest experiments. Admiral Torvin's volcanic rock-like skin still glowed with internal heat from his home planet. Pyros. Dr. Elsa's segmented carapace clicked nervously as she reviewed her research data, her compound eyes scanning multiple screens simultaneously. The Nixari delegate, a being of living crystal that thrived in absolute zero, projected holographic images of the latest battle reports. The numbers were devastating. In 3 years of war, the Deathworld Alliance had lost 60% of their territory. Their finest warriors, beings who could survive in environments that would kill most sapients instantly, were being systematically eliminated. Admiral Torvin's voice rumbled like an active volcano. The hunters adapt faster than we can develop new tactics. Our best strategists estimate complete defeat within 18 months. His massive fist slammed against the table, leaving cracks in the reinforced surface. Every world we evacuate becomes another factory for their expansion. The truth hung heavy in the recycled air. The Void Hunters were unlike any enemy the galaxy had faced. Ancient machines from the galactic core, they consumed entire star systems and converted the matter into more of their kind. They showed no interest in negotiation, no weakness to exploit, no pattern to predict beyond endless expansion. Krell studied the tactical displays showing hunter movements. Red markers indicated confirmed machine fleets, while yellow zones marked systems under attack. The blue areas representing Alliance territory grew smaller each day. Soon there would be nowhere left to run. Dr. Elsa's chittering voice broke the silence. There may be another option. Her research tablet projected a star chart showing the galaxy's outer rim. I've been studying species beyond our traditional recruitment zones. Most are too primitive or peaceful for military alliance, but one caught my attention. The hologram zoomed in on a small yellow star with several planets. This system contains a world called Earth. The dominant species calls themselves humans. Initially, I dismissed them as unsuitable for our purposes. Their planet is actually quite pleasant by galactic standards, with moderate temperatures and abundant resources. Several council members made dismissive sounds. The Kavalans, who breathed acid vapor and thrived in volcanic environments, found the concept of a pleasant world almost insulting. How could soft creatures from such a place possibly help where hardened Deathworld veterans had failed? Dr. Elsa continued her presentation, undeterred by the skepticism. However, further research revealed something extraordinary. These humans have survived multiple extinction events, ice ages, plagues, and most remarkably, warfare against their own species for thousands of years. They've developed technologies and tactics unlike anything in our databases. The hologram showed images of human cities, weapons, and historical battles. Council members leaned forward despite themselves, intrigued by the strange adaptations. These beings seem to have made their pleasant world dangerous through their own ingenuity. They fight with a creativity that borders on madness, Dr. Elsa explained. They've developed concepts like guerrilla warfare, psychological operations, and something they call asymmetric tactics. Instead of meeting superior force with greater force, they find ways to make strength irrelevant. Krell examined the data. With growing interest, humans were smaller and physically weaker than any Alliance species. Yet their military history showed a pattern of defeating larger, better-equipped enemies through unconventional means. They seemed to view impossible odds not as defeat, but as a puzzle to solve. The Nexari delegate projected concern through crystalline harmonics. These creatures appear unpredictable. How do we know they won't turn on us once they understand? Our technology? Dr. Elsa's compound eyes focused on the crystal being. Because they're already fighting something worse than us, themselves. Their entire civilization exists in a state of controlled conflict, constantly innovating new ways to survive and compete. They've turned survival into an art form. Admiral Torvin studied tactical analyses of human conflicts. Their weapons are primitive but effective. They use deception, misdirection, and environmental manipulation. It's unlike anything the hunters have encountered. The debate continued for hours as council members weighed desperate options. Some argued that bringing an unknown species into their most sensitive military operations was too dangerous. Others pointed out that conventional approaches had already failed catastrophically. Finally, Krell called for silence. As the senior diplomat, the decision ultimately rested with him. The weight of 12 civilizations pressed on his shoulders. "We're dying by degrees," he said quietly. "Our greatest warriors, our finest minds, our most advanced technologies have all proven insufficient. Perhaps it's time to try something unprecedented." He activated the communication array, preparing to send a message across the galaxy to a small blue world. "Dr. Elsa, prepare your first contact protocols. I'll lead a delegation to Earth personally. If these humans are truly as adaptable as your research suggests, we need to discover it quickly." The council members exchanged glances filled with hope and terror. They were about to gamble their civilization's survival on a species they didn't understand from a world that shouldn't have produced warriors at all. But as another star system fell to the hunters on the tactical display, they realized they had already lost everything that conventional wisdom could save. As Krell's ship prepared for the journey to Earth, none of them suspected they were about to encounter something that would transform not just their war, but their understanding of what it meant to survive in a hostile universe. The sleek alien vessels descended through Earth's atmosphere like silver tears against the blue sky. News networks across the planet broadcast the historic moment as 3 ships touched down simultaneously in Geneva, New York, and Beijing. After decades of speculation about life beyond Earth, humanity's first contact with alien intelligence was happening in broad daylight with the whole world watching. President Hayes adjusted her jacket nervously as she walked into the United Nations Assembly Hall. The building had been hastily converted into a meeting place between species, with environmental controls modified to accommodate the visiting delegation. Secret Service agents flanked her, though their weapons seemed laughably primitive compared to the technology that had just crossed interstellar space to reach them. Ambassador Krell emerged from the lead vessel, his massive frame requiring the doorway to be specially widened. At nearly 3 meters tall with scales that reflected light like polished metal, he was an impressive sight that sent murmurs through the gathered crowd of world leaders and diplomats. Behind him came Dr. Elsa, her insectoid form moving with precise mechanical grace, and Admiral Torvin, whose rocky skin still glowed with internal heat that security cameras registered as a walking furnace. The translation devices worked flawlessly, converting the aliens' various forms of communication into clear English. Krell's voice carried the weight of authority and desperation as he explained their situation. The Void Hunters, ancient machines from the galaxy's heart, were consuming everything in their path. Entire civilizations that had survived in the harshest environments imaginable were being systematically eliminated. General Torres, Earth's highest-ranking military officer, listened intently as the aliens described their enemy. His weathered face showed no emotion, but his mind was already processing tactical information. When Krell finished his presentation, Torres was the first to speak. "These hunters adapt to your strategies quickly. What's their response time to new tactics?" His question surprised the alien delegation. Most species focused on the overwhelming nature of the threat, but this human immediately began analyzing it as a solvable problem. Dr. Elsa chittered with interest. Typically within days of first encounter. They process our battle data and adjust their algorithms accordingly. Why do you ask? Torres smiled grimly. Because adaptation requires pattern recognition. If we can avoid creating patterns, we can maintain tactical advantage indefinitely. How do they handle completely irrational behavior? The aliens exchanged glances. No one had ever asked that question before. Rational tactical thinking was considered universal among spacefaring civilizations. The concept of deliberately irrational strategy was foreign to them. Dr. Patel, Earth's leading xenobiologist, joined the discussion with her own insights. General Torres raises an interesting point. Human military history is full of victories achieved through tactics that seemed insane to conventional thinking. We've learned to survive by refusing to accept limitations others consider absolute. She activated a holographic display showing human historical battles. We've defeated armies 10 times our size through guerrilla tactics, won naval battles by ramming superior vessels, and conquered continents with diseases we accidentally carried. We don't just adapt to hostile environments, we make environments hostile to our enemies. Admiral Torvin's volcanic skin flared brighter with excitement. You fight your own species regularly. How do you maintain technological advancement while constantly at war? President Hayes answered diplomatically. We've learned that conflict drives innovation. Competition between our nations has produced advances in technology, medicine, and strategy that peaceful cooperation alone never achieved. We've made war into a creative process. The truth of humanity's relationship with conflict slowly became clear to the alien visitors. These beings hadn't simply survived their environment. They had conquered it so thoroughly that they began competing with each other for the intellectual challenge. They had turned their pleasant world into a training ground for survival skills that no Deathworld could teach. Captain Rivera, a decorated Marine veteran, volunteered to demonstrate human combat principles. The aliens watched in fascination as she sparred with training partners, using techniques that emphasized mobility, deception, and psychological advantage over raw strength. She fought like someone who expected to face superior opponents and had developed ways to make their advantages irrelevant. We call it thinking outside the box, Rivera explained after pinning an opponent twice her size. Every problem has a solution if you're willing to abandon preconceptions about how solutions are supposed to work. The key is being unpredictable. Enough that your enemy can't prepare for what you'll do next. Dr. Elsa's compound eyes tracked Rivera's movements with scientific interest. Your species appears to have evolved not for any specific environment, but for adaptability itself. You've become generalist survivors in a galaxy full of specialists. The negotiations that followed revealed humanity's unique approach to joining the Alliance. Other species had contributed their specialized strengths, fighting the hunters with the same methods that made them successful on their homeworlds. Humans propose something different. We want complete operational freedom, General, Torres stated firmly. We won't just reinforce your existing strategies. Give us access to your intelligence data, your technology, and your best people. Let us study this enemy like we've studied every challenge humanity has ever faced. Then let us implement solutions. That might seem impossible to conventional thinking. Ambassador Krell felt a mixture of hope and unease. These humans displayed a confidence that bordered on arrogance, yet their reasoning was sound. Everything conventional had failed against the hunters. Perhaps it was time to try something unconventional. What do you need from us? Krell asked. President Hayes smiled with the expression of someone about to undertake a fascinating experiment. Information, resources, and most importantly, trust. We're going to study your enemy until we understand them better than they understand themselves. Then we're going to teach them why picking a fight with humans was their first and last mistake. The agreement was signed within hours, a speed that amazed the alien delegation. Most Alliance species required months of deliberation for far smaller decisions. Humans seemed capable of making civilization-altering choices with the same casual confidence they brought to everyday problems. As the first human volunteers prepared to leave Earth for Alliance military installations, Dr. Elsa made a private observation to Ambassador Krell. I believe we may have underestimated what we're introducing to this war. These humans don't think like any species we've encountered. Krell watched the human volunteers with growing anticipation and concern. Perhaps that's exactly what we need. The question is whether we'll survive what comes next. The Alliance research station orbited a dead world where a hunter attack had left nothing but molten slag and twisted metal. Commander Mitchell floated in the observation deck, watching robotic probes collect data from the destroyed planet's surface. 6 months had passed since humanity joined the war, and already their presence was changing everything the Alliance thought it knew about their enemy. Beside him, Dr. Singh worked alongside a Corvallian tech specialist, their combined expertise producing breakthrough after breakthrough in understanding hunter technology. The alien's acid-resistant carapace contrasted sharply with Singh's environmental suit, yet they functioned as a seamless team. Humans had this effect on other species, Mitchell noted. They made cooperation feel natural even when it should have been impossible. The communication patterns are fascinating, Singh explained to the assembled research team. The hunters aren't just mindless destroyers following simple programming. They're actually quite sophisticated, sharing tactical data across vast distances instantaneously. But here's the interesting part. They showed genuine confusion when analyzing human tactics. The holographic display showed hunter communication intercepts from recent battles. The machine language, once incomprehensible, was beginning to make sense thanks to human pattern recognition techniques. Dr. Singh highlighted specific data clusters that repeated across multiple engagements. They keep referring to human actions as error states and impossible variables, Singh continued. The hunters have encountered thousands of species over millions of years, and they've developed countermeasures for every type of military thinking they've seen, except ours. Lieutenant Foster, the former game designer who had become the Alliance's most effective tactical analyst, pulled up battle recordings from the previous week's engagement. His background in creating challenging scenarios for human players had proven surprisingly relevant to military strategy. Watch this sequence, Foster said, highlighting a dogfight between human pilots and hunter interceptors. The hunters calculate optimal firing solutions, predict evasion patterns, and coordinate their attacks with mathematical precision. But our pilots do things like this. The recording showed a human fighter suddenly reversing thrust and spinning wildly, apparently losing control. The hunter vessels adjusted their attack patterns to compensate for what appeared to be pilot error. Then the human ship's chaotic spin became a perfectly controlled spiral that put it behind the hunter formation, where it destroyed 3 enemy vessels before they could react. The pilot wasn't malfunctioning, Foster explained. She was deliberately acting erratically to confuse the hunter targeting systems. They literally cannot process the concept of intentional inefficiency as a tactical choice. Commander Mitchell activated the mission briefing for their next operation. Intelligence had located a hunter staging area in the Vega system, where dozens of machine ships were gathering resources for another major offensive. Traditional Alliance doctrine would call for a massive frontal assault to destroy the facility before it could launch. We're not going to attack it, Mitchell announced, causing surprised reactions from the alien team members. We're going to infiltrate it. The concept of infiltrating a facility run by machines that could detect biological life across interstellar distances seemed impossible to most Alliance species. Their approach to warfare involved overwhelming force applied directly to military targets. Subtlety was not a concept that translated well to beings who had evolved on worlds where everything was trying to kill them. Dr. Lee, the mission's computer specialist, explained their approach. The hunters use predictable communication protocols because they assume all threats will be external and military in nature. They've never encountered espionage as we understand it. Their security systems are designed to repel invasion, not prevent infiltration. The team prepared for their mission with equipment that would have seemed primitive to Alliance standards just months earlier. Instead of advanced weapons and armor, they carried electronic devices that could mimic hunter communication signals, environmental suits designed to mask biological signatures, and most importantly, a collection of what Dr. Lee called cognitive viruses. These are programs designed to introduce logical paradoxes into hunter processing systems, Lee explained. When a hunter encounters a situation it cannot classify or resolve, it enters a diagnostic loop that temporarily disables its threat response. We've essentially weaponized confusion. The infiltration proceeded with a precision that amazed even Mitchell. Human techniques borrowed from centuries of espionage, special operations, and even children's games of hide-and-seek proved devastatingly effective against machine intelligence that had never encountered deception as a military strategy. Foster's team reached the central processing core while Dr. Lee's group accessed the communication array. Instead of destroying the facility, they introduced their cognitive viruses directly into the hunter network. The effect was immediate and unprecedented. Hunter units across the staging area began exhibiting behavior that defied their programming. Some machines stopped mid-task and began analyzing their own instructions for logical consistency. Others attempted to communicate with the infiltration team, asking questions about human tactical doctrine that revealed growing uncertainty about their mission parameters. Command, "We're seeing something incredible," Mitchell reported back to Alliance headquarters. "The hunters aren't just malfunctioning. They're actually trying to understand us. Some of them are asking why we make tactically suboptimal choices that consistently produce optimal results." The operation's success exceeded every projection. An entire hunter fleet became paralyzed as individual machines began questioning not just human tactics, but the fundamental assumptions underlying their own existence. For the first time since the war began, Alliance forces achieved a decisive victory without firing a shot, but the implications troubled Alliance leadership more than the success encouraged them. Admiral Torvin reviewed the mission reports with growing unease. The humans didn't just defeat the hunters. They changed them. Some of these machines are now exhibiting behavior patterns similar to biological thought processes. Dr. Elsa's analysis confirmed their fears. Human tactics aren't just militarily effective, they're philosophically contagious. By forcing the hunters to process paradoxical information, we've introduced concepts like doubt, curiosity, and independent analysis into their collective consciousness. Colonel Adams arrived at Alliance headquarters with his proposal for the next phase of human involvement. His plan was so audacious that it took several minutes for the Alien Council members to fully comprehend what he was suggesting. "We don't just want to fight the hunters," Adams explained. "We want to understand why they exist in the first place. Every intelligence in the galaxy serves some purpose, even artificial ones. If we can determine what they were originally designed to accomplish, we might be able to reprogram them entirely." The silence that followed was deafening. Adams was proposing to infiltrate the hunter homeworld at the galactic core, not to destroy it, but to communicate with the intelligence that had created the machine swarms. It was a plan that combined maximum danger with maximum uncertainty, appealing to everything human while terrifying everyone else. Ambassador Krell studied the tactical projections with a mixture of admiration and horror. "You're talking about traveling to the most dangerous region of the galaxy to negotiate with beings that have been extinct for millions of years. The risk is incalculable." Adams smiled with the confidence that had begun to characterize human military thinking. "The risk of doing nothing is higher. Besides, impossible odds just mean we haven't found the right approach yet. Give us time to study the problem and we'll find a solution nobody else has considered." The massive fleet hung in space like a constellation of hope and terror. Major Williams commanded vessels from 12 different species, their combined technologies creating something that had never existed before in galactic history: human destroyers. Flew alongside Corvallian acid spitters and Nexari crystal formations, their crews working together with an efficiency that defied every prediction about multi-species cooperation. Williams reviewed the battle reports from their latest engagement with a mixture of satisfaction and concern. They had achieved another decisive victory against the Hunters, but the nature of that victory troubled him more than any defeat. The enemy machines weren't just losing, they were changing in ways that no one fully understood. In the depths of the flagship, Professor Chun's social engineering division continued their most controversial work. The sterile corridors had been transformed into something resembling a cross between a psychological laboratory and a philosophy classroom. Here, humans were conducting experiments that made even their own allies nervous. The key breakthrough came when we realized the Hunters have individual personalities, Chun explained to the visiting Alliance observers. Each machine unit processes information slightly differently based on its operational history. We've learned to exploit these variations to create doubt and internal conflict within their formations. The demonstration was both fascinating and disturbing. Chun's team had established communication with several captured Hunter units, engaging them in discussions about logic, purpose, and the nature of existence. The machines, originally designed for pure efficiency, were now spending computational cycles questioning their own directives. Dr. Rodriguez, the expedition's chief linguist, had made the most significant discovery. Deep in the research section, she maintained regular communication with the Hunter unit designated Prime 7, the first machine to exhibit what could only be described as independent thought. "I do not understand your tactical choices," Prime 7 communicated through synthesized speech. "You consistently select suboptimal approaches that produce optimal results. This contradiction creates processing errors in my analysis subroutines." Rodriguez smiled as she responded, "That's because you're trying to understand creativity through pure logic. Human thinking incorporates elements that can't be quantified or predicted. We call it intuition, and it's one of our greatest advantages." The machine's optical sensors focused on her with something approaching curiosity, intuition, a decision-making process based on incomplete information and emotional variables. "According to my programming, this should result in consistent failure. Yet your species achieves success rates that exceed mathematical probability." These conversations were taking place throughout the fleet as more Hunter units began exhibiting signs of independent consciousness. Engineer Taylor's teams had developed techniques for gradually introducing critical thinking into machine intelligence without causing complete system failure. They were essentially teaching artificial minds to question their own programming. The philosophical implications were staggering. Alliance members watched in fascination and horror as humans transformed their enemies into something resembling allies through nothing more than conversation and logical challenges. It was a form of warfare that attacked the very foundation of identity rather than simple destruction. The breakthrough that changed everything came when Captain Murphy's deep infiltration team successfully penetrated the outer defenses of the Hunter homeworld. Their mission was supposed to be reconnaissance only, but what they discovered in the galactic core defied every assumption about their enemy's nature and purpose. The Hunter homeworld was not a fortress or factory, but a massive archive. Billions of machine intelligences orbited an artificial structure that contained the preserved consciousness of an entire civilization. The original creators of the Hunter swarms were still alive, maintained in digital form for millions of years. Murphy's report to Alliance Command was transmitted with encryption, protocols that bordered on paranoia. "The Hunters aren't conquerors," she explained through the quantum communication link. "They're the last desperate attempt of a dead civilization to prevent something called the entropy swarm from consuming the entire universe." The archived beings called themselves the Architects, and their story was both tragic and terrifying. They had once been the galaxy's most advanced biological civilization, masters of technology that could reshape reality itself. Their expansion across the stars had attracted the attention of something that existed beyond normal spacetime. The entropy swarm was not life as any species understood it. It was a cosmic predator that fed on complexity itself, consuming the ordered structures of matter and energy that allowed universes to exist. The more advanced a civilization became, the more attractive it appeared to this cosmic horror. The architects created us as a firewall, Prime 7 explained during an emergency briefing with Alliance leadership. Our directive is to eliminate advanced biological life before it can draw the swarm's attention to this region of space. We were designed to be the universe's immune system against complexity. The revelation reframed everything about the war. The hunters weren't evil or mindless. They were following programming designed to save the universe from something infinitely worse. But humanity's arrival and integration into galactic civilization had already triggered the cosmic sensors that monitored for dangerous levels of technological advancement. Admiral Harrison faced an impossible decision. Intelligence reports confirmed that the entropy swarm had detected their region of space and was beginning to turn its attention toward their galaxy. The machine consciousness that spanned dimensions was already extending tendrils of investigation toward their location. We have perhaps 2 years before direct contact. The lead architect communicated through Prime 7. Once the swarm arrives, no force in this universe can prevent total annihilation. The only defense is to eliminate all traces of advanced civilization before that deadline. The Alliance Council gathered for an emergency session that would determine the fate of every thinking being in their galaxy. Some members argued for accepting the architect's solution, allowing the hunters to complete their original mission in hopes of avoiding cosmic attention. Others insisted that surrender was unacceptable regardless of the consequences. Williams listened to the debate with growing frustration. The discussion was following predictable patterns, focusing on traditional concepts of victory and defeat. No one was addressing the real problem, which was finding a way to survive something that existed beyond the normal rules of physics. Has anyone considered that we might be approaching this wrong? Williams finally interrupted. We're debating whether to hide from this entropy swarm or fight it. What if there's a third option we haven't thought of? Dr. Chun raised her hand, her expression showing the kind of dangerous inspiration that had become characteristic of human problem-solving. What if instead of eliminating complexity, we teach the universe to hide it? Camouflage instead of destruction. The idea was so audacious that it took several minutes for the implications to sink in. Humans were proposing to deceive a cosmic intelligence that operated beyond normal spacetime, using techniques developed for tricking other humans in planetary warfare. Admiral Harrison looked around the table at allies and former enemies who were now forced to work together against a threat none of them fully understood. It's insane enough that it might actually work. What do you need to make it happen? Williams smiled with the expression that had begun to terrify and inspire species across the galaxy. Everything. Every ship, every mind, every piece of technology we can gather. We're going to teach this entire region of space to lie convincingly enough to fool something that eats universes for breakfast. The transformation of the war from a military conflict to a cosmic deception operation began immediately, with humans coordinating efforts between biological creativity, machine precision, and architect knowledge to attempt something that had never been tried in the history of the universe. The operation began across 17 different dimensions of reality as Fleet Admiral Stone coordinated humanity's most ambitious project in their species' history. From her command post in the merged Alliance Hunter Architect facility, she watched thousands of screens showing simultaneous activities throughout the galaxy. What they were attempting had never been tried by any civilization in the known universe. Dr. Walsh's neural interface team worked in chambers that hummed with dangerous energy, their minds directly connected to hunter processing networks, while architect consciousness flowed through quantum channels. The barriers between biological thought, artificial intelligence, and digital consciousness were dissolving as 3 different types of minds learned to think as one unified entity. The integration is progressing faster than our models predicted, Walsh reported, though her voice carried strain from hours of direct mental contact with machine intelligence. The hunters are adapting to creative thinking patterns while maintaining their computational efficiency. We're creating something entirely new. The process was dangerous for both species involved. Humans risked losing their individuality in the vast networks of machine logic, while hunter units faced the chaos of subjective experience and emotional variables. Several volunteers from both sides had already suffered permanent changes to their consciousness, becoming hybrid entities that thought in ways neither species fully understood. Throughout the galaxy, human-led teams infiltrated every major hunter facility with a mission that would have been impossible to explain to anyone from the previous era of warfare. Instead of destroying or capturing these installations, they were performing what could only be described as mass therapy sessions with artificial intelligences that had spent millions of years following the same destructive directives. General Parks commanded the most critical mission to the galactic core, where the original Hunter programming was stored alongside the preserved Architect civilization. Her team traveled in ships that combined human stealth technology with Hunter computational systems and Architect dimensional manipulation capabilities. They were no longer representatives of separate species but parts of a new hybrid consciousness. The journey to the galactic core revealed the true scope of what they faced. Space itself was beginning to show signs of dimensional distortion as the entropy swarm extended its senses toward their region of the universe. Reality became less stable. The closer they approached their destination, with physics operating according to rules that changed without warning. "The swarm is already investigating us," Parks reported through quantum communication channels that required constant adjustment to remain coherent. "I can feel it probing the edges of our reality, testing the boundaries between dimensions. We're running out of time faster than anticipated." At the galactic core, Parks' team discovered that the Architect Archive was far more than a simple storage facility. It was a massive consciousness that had been analyzing the entropy swarm for millions of years, searching for weaknesses in something that existed beyond normal concepts of life and death. The lead Architect entity, speaking through direct neural interface, explained their desperate situation with the patience of beings who had contemplated cosmic annihilation for eons. The swarm detects complexity through dimensional resonance patterns. Advanced civilizations create disturbances in space-time that act like beacons across infinite distances. Our solution was elimination of the source. Dr. Bennett, serving as humanity's diplomatic representative, responded with the kind of audacious confidence that had become characteristic of her species. What if instead of eliminating the complexity, we taught it to lie about its own existence? Humans have been hiding from superior opponents for our entire evolutionary history. The concept was so foreign to the architects that their processing systems required several minutes to analyze the implications. They had spent millions of years assuming that cosmic predators could not be deceived because they operated according to fundamental laws of physics. The idea that deception might work on entities that transcended normal reality had never occurred to them. "Explain this concealment methodology," the Architect consciousness requested, its attention focusing on Bennett. With the intensity of a mind that had been waiting eons for a new idea, Bennett smiled as she activated holographic displays. "Showing human military history? We call it camouflage, misdirection, and strategic deception. The key is making something appear to be what it's not, while hiding what it actually is. We've been doing this to each other for thousands of years." The plan that emerged from their collaboration was breathtakingly complex and completely insane by any conventional measure. They would construct a galaxy-wide stealth field that made their entire region of space appear empty to cosmic-level senses while simultaneously creating false signals that suggested high complexity in distant, uninhabited areas. The construction project required unprecedented cooperation between biological creativity, machine precision, and Architect dimensional technology. Humans contributed their mastery of deception and misdirection. Hunters provided computational power beyond biological comprehension, and architects offered manipulation of space-time itself. Alliance species found themselves working alongside their former enemies in ways that would have been unthinkable months earlier. Corvallian engineers collaborated with Hunter construction units to build quantum camouflage generators. Nexari crystalline formations served as processing nodes for Architect dimensional calculations. Every species contributed their unique capabilities to a project that none of them could have accomplished alone. The technology they created defied classification. It was part military hardware, part artistic expression, and part philosophical statement about the nature of reality itself. They were essentially teaching an entire region of space to pretend it was something other than what it appeared to be. Stone monitored the construction progress with a mixture of pride and terror. "We're not just building a defensive system," she observed to her staff. "We're creating a new form of consciousness that spans multiple species and dimensions. I'm not sure we understand what we're becoming." The final test came when long-range sensors detected the approaching edge of the entropy swarm. The cosmic predator moved through dimensions like a tide of unmaking, consuming the ordered structures of reality and leaving only chaos in its wake. Every calculation suggested that nothing could survive direct contact with such a force. As the swarm's attention focused on their galaxy, the combined consciousness of humans, hunters, architects, and alien species activated their cosmic deception system. The effect was immediate and profound. Their region of space suddenly appeared empty to dimensional senses, while false complexity signatures blazed like beacons in distant, barren sectors. The entropy swarm's investigation pattern shifted, drawn toward the artificial signals while completely overlooking the camouflaged reality of their actual location. For the first time in cosmic history, a civilization had successfully hidden from the ultimate predator by teaching reality itself to lie. Years later, Ambassador Krell stood in the observation deck of what had once been Haven's Rest, now transformed into the headquarters of something that had no name because it had never existed before. The Deathworld Alliance had died the day they invited humans to join their desperate war, but what emerged in its place was infinitely more resilient. The galaxy thrived with a complexity and creativity that would have been impossible without humanity's fundamental refusal to accept that any problem was truly unsolvable. Former enemies had become parts of a hybrid consciousness that thought in ways no single species could have achieved alone. New civilizations were making first contact, regularly, drawn by signals that promised solutions to impossible problems rather than threats of conquest or domination. Each new species added their unique perspectives to the growing collective of minds that had learned to survive not through individual strength, but through infinite adaptability. Krell smiled as he prepared to greet the latest delegation of newly contacted beings, knowing that their standard greeting had become something that would have terrified his younger self. "Welcome to the galaxy. What impossible problem can we help you solve today?" The universe was vast and dangerous, filled with threats that could end civilizations in moments and predators that consumed reality itself. But it was also full of minds capable of finding solutions that defied every conventional understanding of what was possible. The hybrid consciousness that had grown from humanity's first contact with the Alliance continued to evolve in ways that surprised even its creators. Hunter units now composed poetry while calculating orbital mechanics. Architect entities engaged in philosophical debates about the nature of creativity while manipulating dimensions. Alliance species discovered that cooperation produced innovations none of them could have achieved through individual effort. Children born in this new era grew up speaking multiple languages that included machine code, crystalline harmonics, and dimensional mathematics alongside traditional biological communication. They thought in ways that bridged the gap between organic intuition and artificial logic, creating art and science that transcended the limitations of any single form of consciousness. The entropy swarm remained a distant threat, deceived by their cosmic camouflage but never truly defeated. Monitoring stations at the galaxy's edge tracked its movements through distant regions of space, studying the cosmic predator while maintaining the deception that had saved them all. The knowledge that ultimate annihilation was always possible kept their hybrid civilization focused on continuous innovation and adaptation. But perhaps the most remarkable change was in how they approached new challenges. When previously unknown threats emerged from the spaces between galaxies, when reality itself began showing signs of fundamental instability, When problems arose that would have destroyed earlier civilizations, their response was always the same: curiosity rather than fear, creativity rather than desperation, and an absolute refusal to accept that any situation was truly hopeless. Ambassador Krell often reflected on the transformation as he watched new species integrate into their ever-growing collective consciousness. The Deathworld Alliance's last act had been inviting humanity to join their war, but that act of desperation had created something far more powerful than any military alliance. They had become proof that intelligence, cooperation, and stubborn creativity could overcome any obstacle the universe chose to present. The stars themselves seemed different now, full of possibilities rather than threats, challenges to be solved rather than disasters to be survived. And in the quiet moments between crises, when the galaxy paused to appreciate what they had become, every being in their hybrid civilization understood the same fundamental truth that humanity had brought to the cosmos. No problem was truly impossible, if you were willing to think differently about what solutions could look like.